In October 2004, Jennifer Hitchcock returns home to Lincoln, Nebraska. Her stay in Wisconsin finally ended, with police taking her away from her menacing and controlling ex-boyfriend. But Maurice Mason remains obsessed with Jennifer and sets off in hot pursuit, determined to get her back, whether she likes it or not. The police, unlike Jennifer, are well aware that Mason is a man with a disturbing past, arising from his attempts to seduce young girls, very young girls.
When Mason was 17, he was accused of having sex with a 15-year-old girl. It was essentially statutory rape, and her parents said that he was trying to get her to move to Florida with him, but apparently no charges were ever filed.
6 years later, Mason is arrested again. This time, he's charged after trying to convince an even younger girl to run off with him.
Now he's 23 years old, and he has a sexual relationship with a 14-year-old girl. He pleads guilty to that crime and is sentenced to 2 years in prison.
Mason's own family recognizes he has an unhealthy interest in young girls.
He always seemed to like younger girls than he was. He always seemed to want a virgin. He'd be going out with girls 14, 13.
He selects inexperienced, easily impressible girls because he does not feel that he has the abilities to develop relationships and maintain relationships with women his own age.
Mason is released in 1992 after completing his 2-year sentence. It's not long before he's back in trouble.
So he hatches a plan to break into his niece's home, steal her jewelry and credit cards and cash. Although he was convicted for burglary, he told authorities that he was actually planning to kill his niece.
Maurice Mason wants to convince the authorities he's a psycho.
You know, not a day goes by when I don't think about killing somebody.
Mason tells the psychologist that he fantasizes regularly about killing people.
And every day I could just go down there and torture them at will.
He also dreams of having prison cells in his basement where he can lock people up for extended periods of time.
Chop them up, cut them up.
And he sees this as a perfect crime, this thing where he can go around and torment people at his own will.
You never get caught.
This is an indication that he likely has a diagnosis of sexual sadism, where he gets sexually aroused by the thought or the act of degrading or humiliating someone else by physical, sexual, or psychological violence.
In early 2002, Mason, now 34, is released. He moves in with his 24-year-old nephew, Benny Fryer, who looks up to his uncle as someone he can finally trust and believe in after a harrowing childhood.
Benny Fryer had a very troubled background. He was sexually abused by his father, and all of the children ended up in foster homes.
With his father in prison for the assaults, young Benny Fryer clings to the friendship and advice on life offered by Uncle Maurice.
Maurice was pretty much the only uncle that really was around him very much. It didn't turn out to be so good in the long run.
Ben was very vulnerable to Mason's manipulations of him because Mason appeared to be a very benevolent father figure.
Now, Uncle Maurice needs a favor from his keen-to-please nephew. They arrive in Lincoln, Nebraska. After dropping Benny off at a friend's apartment, Mason has only one number to dial.
He finally gets Jen on the phone and tells her he's in Nebraska. He wants to see her for just a couple of minutes.
Fearful, she reluctantly agrees.
And so she tells her mom she's going over to her friend's house.
Even though he wasn't physically with her, she was still kind of being controlled by him just because that's how things had been for a while. And I think she would agree to any number of things that she didn't really want to do because she was just so afraid of what he might do to her.
After several hours of aimlessly driving around, Jennifer tells Mason she wants to go home.
Tired of hearing about.
They argue, and his rage suddenly spirals out of control.
Mason picks up a 40-ounce beer bottle and smashes her in the face with it. There's a bucket of motor oil nearby. Mason tries to drown her in it. It's very slippery though. He's still fighting back and she gets away.
But not for long.
See what you made me do? Come on, get up. Get up. Come on. Come on.
It's really a miracle at this point that she's even alive. I mean, she's been brutally beaten. And she's really fearful now that Mason's on the verge of killing her. He's going to finish her off.
Get in there. Stay. Listen,
Mason drives to a truck stop on the outskirts of Lincoln.
She's in the trunk, moaning, groaning, and he's sitting in the front seat of the car and just completely ignores her. They stayed there all night. He does nothing to help her.
The next morning, Mason, with Jennifer still bleeding and suffering in the sweltering trunk, picks up his nephew, Fryer. They rent a room at a local motel and smuggle her inside to try and clean her wounds.
You're my girl. I love you. I care about you.
It's demeaning, degrading, and torturous. It's an awful way to treat another human being, and it's more indication that this is a very sick and twisted person.
Jennifer is cut, bruised, and swollen. Mason comes up with a plan to buy time for her to heal and to hang on to the woman he can't let go.
He knows that if anyone sees her in this condition, he's in huge trouble. He's going to go to jail for it. So he decides to go back to Wisconsin with her and hide out. Hopefully her wounds will heal. Mason's now in complete control of her. So she agrees to go with him, but she really knows deep down inside that it's not going to be a good situation.
Right now, Mason and Fryer have a more immediate concern. They're desperate for money, and an old acquaintance is about to discover that when Maurice Mason comes calling, there's trouble ahead.